I'm the most famous marriage-desperate woman in Merrowfield. But every time my fiancé, Gavin Northwood, and I try to hold a wedding, disaster strikes. The first time, his mother fell down a staircase and broke her leg. The second time, Scout, the dog Gavin had raised for 8 years, died of poisoning. The third time, my mother was struck by a falling sign and critically injured. The fourth time, the fifth time. Every attempt after that ended with someone close to us getting hurt. I hated that curse, and on my 30th birthday I dragged Gavin out to see a spiritual advisor and have it stripped off us for good. Before we left, I happened to see a group chat on his phone called Operation Protect Gavin and Serena. One name came straight into my head. Serena Colebrook. Gavin's first love, and my stepsister. I stared for a long time before I opened the chat with shaking hands. The pinned announcement at the top read, 29th successful operation preventing Gavin Northwood from marrying Maris Ellington. The members were my mother, Gavin's mother, my stepsister, Gavin himself, and my best friend, Paige Merrick. Everything came clear in an instant. My heart clenched hard, but I only opened my own phone, my face perfectly blank. It doesn't matter. Who says the man I'm desperate to marry has to be Gavin Northwood? I looked at the message that other man had sent me. Didn't we agree that if you still weren't married at 30, you'd marry me? I answered calmly. Yes, I'll be there. The second my message went through, Gavin Northwood came out, dressed and ready. He caught me setting his phone face down exactly where I'd found it. His expression darkened instantly, and he strode over and snatched it away. Maris, you know I don't like other people touching my phone. I still hadn't come all the way back from what I'd just seen. I kept my face cold and asked him, Gavin, are you hiding something from me? His brows drew together, and the answer came out of him too fast. Because I don't like people digging into my privacy, now you suspect me? We've been together 10 years and you don't trust me even that much? When I said nothing, he seemed to hear how defensive he sounded, and his voice softened. Don't be ridiculous. I don't keep secrets from you. A cold smile tugged at my mouth. Whenever somebody hit a sore spot, he attacked first. Every time. Even the way his lashes moved when he lied hadn't changed. The last thin thread of hope in me snapped. I turned, sat down on the couch, and looked at my nails. Forget it. I'm tired. I don't want to see the advisor anymore. Exasperation spread over his face at once, as though I were a child throwing a fit. You were the one who wouldn't stop pushing me to go yesterday. Why are you always up and down like this? Right then his phone rang. The instant he saw who was calling, the anger in his eyes melted into something gentle. Whatever you want. I've got something to take care of. Think about what I said. His black sedan pulled away from the house. I clenched my fists, then hailed a cab and followed him anyway. The sedan finally stopped somewhere painfully familiar. Paige Merrick's wedding planning studio. I looked in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. One glance was enough to knock the air out of me. My stepsister, Serena Colebrook, was trying on a wedding dress. Scout, the dog who was supposed to be dead of poisoning, bounced around her feet. Margaret Northwood, who was supposed to have shattered her leg in a fall, was hurrying back and forth in perfect health, helping Serena compare styles. My own mother, Denise Ellington, who was supposed to be flat on her back after a serious injury, crouched on the floor arranging Serena's hem. And Paige, who told me just last night she had something really important on today, stood off to the side gushing. Serena, look at you. Look how beautiful you are. Gavin's eyes followed Serena everywhere, full of a tenderness I'd never once seen turned on me. My fingertips shook with the ache of it. I could still see myself holding a barely breathing Scout, crying until my chest tore open. Years ago, the spiritual advisor Elias Vance had told me Gavin and I were badly matched, and that marrying him would bring disaster. I hadn't believed it at first, but the disasters really did start coming, one after another. After what happened to Scout, Gavin disappeared for an entire month. He drove me half insane, leaving me to blame myself every single day while I waited for word from him and begged to be forgiven. When Margaret broke her leg, I even quit my job so I could take care of her. After my mother was badly hurt, I cried until there was nothing left in me, and finally believed every word Vance had said. I climbed the steps of Hollowpine Abbey on my knees, stopping to bow every third step until the skin split open, because I thought I had to scrub some curse off myself. And now their happiness, bright and loud in front of me, turned every one of those sacrifices into proof of how stupid I'd been. And it hurt so badly I could hardly stay upright. I couldn't help myself. I messaged Gavin. I'm sick. He answered in seconds. Medicine's in the nightstand. Get it yourself. You're 30. Learn to be independent. When I looked up again, he was already back at Serena's side, as though the message had never arrived. My eyes stung. It hadn't always been like this. Once, whenever I got sick, he wouldn't leave my side for a second. He'd cool my fever with damp cloths, make soup, and blow on every spoonful before he fed it to me. Only now did it come back to me that everything had started changing the day Serena came home from abroad. He started drifting, and he stopped hearing anything I said. He hid parts of his social feed, so I couldn't tell where he was anymore. I'd believed 10 years with me was enough to thaw Gavin out, enough to make him let go of the girl he'd wanted and never had. And I'd assumed that Serena, after all that time studying overseas, would look down on him even harder than she used to. But that awkward boy had grown into a polished, successful man, and Serena changed her mind. And some corner of Gavin had never stopped belonging to her. If he was always going to choose the other woman, why keep humiliating myself? My phone buzzed again. It was the other man. Maris, are you serious about this? I didn't hesitate. Completely. When I got home, I started packing without a second thought. Gavin didn't come back until after dark. As usual, he didn't notice anything different about me. Maris, I brought you a present. He pushed a blue gift box toward me with 2 fingers. I met the gentle smile in his eyes, and what I felt was complicated. Right then a social media alert pushed through on my phone. Serena Colebrook had announced her wedding, loudly and publicly. I glanced at the cover image on the notification. Behind a table spread with gold jewelry sat a mountain of guest favors. The same blue gift box that was sitting in front of me. A cold smile pulled at my mouth. I thanked Gavin with nothing behind it. He seemed to relax. As long as you like it. Then he turned and went into the bathroom. I opened Serena's announcement video. So Gavin had proposed to her at the airport the day she came home. Serena, before you left, you told me my wedding had to be saved for you. So no matter how hard it got, I kept my wedding for you all these years. His eyes were earnest and his voice broke. As though the wedding he'd promised me were nothing but an obstacle in the way of his devotion. My mother, Gavin's mother Margaret, and Paige were all there, proud of themselves for the part they'd played in wrecking my weddings. The moment Serena nodded, they all rushed in to hug her, glowing like fans whose favorite couple had finally gotten together for real. My mind went blank for a moment. And what arrived before the anger was a dull ache in my chest. So all those years of pain came down to one careless sentence Serena had said 10 years ago. And everyone around me had known the two of them were promised to each other all along. The video cut to a montage of their past together. They kicked through the surf at Coral Haven, fed the gulls at Lake Vireo, chased migrating whales off the Solmere coast, and waited up for the northern lights in North Aster. Every one of those days was a day Gavin had told me he was traveling for work. In 10 years he never took me anywhere. He always said he was busy. In school it was wait until summer break. After graduation it was wait until the honeymoon. My chest tightened anyway, whether I wanted it to or not. The last frame of the video was the wedding date. 2 days from now. I closed my phone thinking. Gavin came out of the bathroom right then. I asked him out of nowhere. 2 days from now. Do you want to get married? He froze for a second, then came over and put an arm around my waist. You're not worried about me anymore? What if we try to get married and something happens again? There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, as though he were certain I'd back down. I just met his eyes cold. I want to. Are you marrying me or not? Irritation flickered between his brows, but he kept his voice soft. Of course. But I had the advisor run the dates, and the best one for us is 4 days from now. He said it like the most reasonable thing in the world, without a trace of guilt on him. A cold smile lifted the corner of my mouth. No. I want the day after tomorrow. Gavin's face went dark instantly, his chest rising and falling hard. Are you really that desperate to get married? No wonder all of Merrowfield laughs at you for it. Even Paige says it about you behind your back. You really ought to take a hard look at yourself. Do you have any idea how much this embarrasses me? Marriage crazy. The phrase went straight through me. Back when Gavin and I first got together, somebody mocked me for chasing after a man and called it pathetic. Gavin got into a brawl with him over it, just to settle the score for me. That night the moon was bright and clear, and he made me a promise through a split lip. Maris, I'll marry you before we're 25. After that, I spent every year waiting to put on an apron and be somebody's wife, waiting for ordinary dinners across a table from him. But 1 year dragged into the next, hope collapsed again and again. And in the end I became the joke of all Merrowfield. Gavin was the one who taught me to expect it. Now Gavin was the one calling me marriage crazy. My throat closed up, and nothing came out. There was just one thing he didn't know. 2 days from now, I was getting married. Absolutely. Whether he showed up or not. When I said nothing, Gavin seemed to realize he'd gone too far. He stepped forward to take my hand. But he'd barely taken 2 steps when his phone rang. The corner of his mouth lifted right away, and he tossed one line over his shoulder. Get some rest. Don't wait up for me. Then he turned and walked out. This time I didn't make a scene. I just quietly took the invitations out of the drawer. I wrote in the names, 1 card at a time. Then I booked the venue I'd dreamed about for years. When it was all done, I felt lighter than I had in my whole life. The next day, though, Gavin came storming to the house with Serena. Maris, was this you? I looked into his eyes blazing with anger, and asked him back, was what me? The cold in his gaze felt like it could drown me. Serena's wedding venue burned. That was you, wasn't it? How did I never notice you were this jealous? I stared at him, unable to believe it. What makes you think I had anything to do with it? He gave a harsh laugh. Then tell me why you suddenly had to have me marry you tomorrow. You found out, didn't you? He'd barely finished when my mother, Margaret, and Paige all came charging in just as furious. Exactly. If Serena hadn't asked whether it might have been you, we'd all still be in the dark. You're too greedy. A marriage-crazy woman like you doesn't come close to Serena. Gavin puts you up in a house like this and you ought to be grateful. Paige gave me a sideways look, disgust all over her face. My mother and Margaret, by contrast, wore nothing but disappointment. Maris, honey, it isn't that I'm playing favorites. But you really shouldn't have done that to Serena. She's still your sister. You can't even let her have one wedding. That's right, Maris. I've already accepted you as my daughter-in-law. It's only a wedding. Did you have to destroy it? They went back and forth over me until the words were deep enough to drown in, as though I were some heartless, unforgivable criminal. Serena stood behind them the whole time, playing the good girl, generous and unruffled. The absurdity of it hit me so hard I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I cut the whole performance off. All of you be quiet. After all these years, aren't you the ones who betrayed me? That's right. For Serena. Every one of them had betrayed me. Serena had been the child everyone else's parents held up as an example. Pretty clever, always quick with the right thing to say. She always showed people the best version of herself and kept every one of them charmed. Not like me, with everything written on my face and my words always coming out clumsy. That was exactly why my mother spent the family's savings sending her overseas to study. Paige, who used to say Maris is the best person in the world, turned into Serena's biggest fan the moment they met. She forgot that when her parents were gravely ill, I was the one who begged Gavin for a job for her, which is how she saved enough to open her studio. Margaret, who used to tell everyone how lucky she was to get me as a daughter-in-law, forgot everything I'd done to win her over, and forgot the nights I went without sleep taking care of her when she was ill. Watching them all wind up to argue back, the anger closed around my throat. That was when Serena stepped forward. Maris, I know you're unhappy, but I never wanted marriage at all. Gavin's the only person I've ever loved. It's just a wedding. Let me have it, all right? Her lips trembled and her eyes filled. Everyone crowded around to comfort her and turned resentful faces on me. Scout wouldn't stop barking, and the moment one of Serena's tears hit the floor, he lunged at me like he meant to bite. I stumbled backward in fright, knocked over a glass, hit the wall, and split my head open. But when I opened my eyes through the dizziness, all of them were fussing over the cut on Serena's leg from the broken glass. My mother was even swearing at me. Honestly, Maris, 30 years old and still this careless. Gavin didn't spare me so much as a glance. He scooped Serena up in his arms and left me one cold line. We're taking Serena to get her leg looked at. You stay here and think about what you've done. The door slammed hard, but my heart had stopped hurting. I pushed myself up off the floor, called a courier, and shipped my things out, box by box. When Gavin got back, he noticed the bandage on my head. He asked me anxiously how I'd gotten hurt. I didn't stop writing out the invitations. I just said coldly, "It's nothing." He saw the invitations, and a smile curved his mouth instantly. Still thinking about marrying me, Maris? Fine, I'll give you that. Once Serena's wedding is over, I'll marry you a couple of days after. Go try on dresses yourself. Just tell me the venue when it's time. I made a noise of agreement, too tired to deal with him. Smiling all over his face, he kissed my forehead and went out in high spirits. A cold smile pulled at my own mouth. There'd be no waiting a couple of days. My wedding was tonight. But just as everything was set, #Serena Colebrook the other woman shot straight to the top of the trending list. The post laid out, at length, exactly how the Northwood Group CEO's fiancé's stepsister had worked her way in. The comment section was having a field day. I knew instantly whose hand was behind it, and a smile I couldn't have named crossed my face. A second later, Gavin and Serena burst through the door. Maris, I never imagined you were this kind of person. And to think I called you my sister. She'd stripped off her usual meekness and gone straight on the attack. I looked at her coldly and almost laughed. Before I could react, a hand cracked across my face. How did I give birth to something like you? Over a man you'd destroy your own sister's reputation? My mother's blow knocked my head sideways, and I found myself looking straight into Gavin's eyes, cold enough to frighten anyone. Maris, go apologize to Serena and I'll still give you your wedding. I forced the tears back down out of my eyes. I don't need it. Paige let out a scornful little laugh. Gavin, what did I tell you? Nobody knows what Maris is like better than I do. She isn't in Serena's league. Margaret took my hand with all the false warmth she had. Maris, I'm begging you. Go tell the press you were desperate to get married and jealous. Please. I pulled my hand free, done wasting energy on any of them. But the words kept coming from behind me, thick enough to drown in. Serena is your sister. How can you be this cruel? Marriage crazy Maris. She's so cheap it's sickening. I swallowed the anger and tried to leave, but a grip closed around my arm hard. It was Gavin. He spoke low, right beside my ear. Maris, you went too far this time. Even I can't help you now. The instant he finished, Paige opened the door. The camera lights hit me full in the face. Before my eyes could adjust, Gavin was already talking. Members of the press, I want to clear up the rumors that are trending right now. I have never intended to marry Maris Ellington. There has only ever been Serena. Maris is simply desperate to be married, and her jealousy caused all of you this trouble. I apologize on her behalf. The moment he stopped, footsteps sounded at the door. The reporters parted to make a path for whoever was coming. The man wore a black overcoat, and the weight he carried into a room was quiet and expensive. Mr. Northwood, are you saying my fiancé is desperate to marry you? The silence that followed those words was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The flashbulbs died down for a fraction of a second as every camera lens in the entryway swiveled away from Gavin Northwood and locked onto the man standing at the threshold. Julian Sterling, the head of Sterling Enterprise, whose family held the financial lifeblood of Merrowfield and half the northern coast. A man who rarely appeared in society, tabloids because the press was terrified of his legal team, yet whose name alone commanded instant deference in every boardroom across the province. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal black overcoat over a crisp white shirt, the collar open just enough to lend him an air of dangerous, effortless composure. His features were sharply carved, his dark eyes colder and vastly deeper than Gavin's. Behind him stood two personal security officers in discreet suits, their presence immediately blocking the door and hemming the press corps inside. Gavin's face drained of color. His hand, which had been clamped like a vice around my wrist, went limp. Mr. Sterling. Gavin's voice cracked, the confident patriarch routine vanishing instantly. What are you doing here? Julian didn't look at Gavin. He didn't even acknowledge the microphones shoved toward him or the frantic whispers of the reporters. His eyes found mine across the crowded room. In those dark depths, I saw no mockery, no pity, and none of the disdain I had endured for a decade. There was only a calm, unyielding reassurance. Julian stepped forward, the reporters parting before him like water before the prow of an iron ship. He stopped directly in front of me, took my left hand in his palm warm and dry against my chilled skin, and gently smoothed down the cuff of my sleeve. Did you finish packing? He asked softly. His voice wasn't loud, but in the dead quiet of the room, every word rang out like a bronze bell. My throat felt tight, but for the first time in years, the tension wasn't from humiliation. It was the sudden, overwhelming release of a burden I had carried far too long. Everything's already sent ahead, I answered, my voice clear and steady. Julian nodded, the faintest trace of a smile touching the corner of his lips. Good. The registrar is waiting at St. Jude's Chapel, and the dinner reservation is set for 8. We shouldn't keep our guests waiting. Wait. Paige shrieked from behind the camera crews, her voice shrill with disbelief. Maris, what kind of ridiculous play is this? Who did you hire to put on this act? Mr. Sterling, you can't let her drag your name into this. She's obsessed with getting married. She's been begging Gavin for 10 years. Julian turned his head slightly, his gaze slicing across Paige like a frozen blade. Paige choked on her next breath, the words dying in her throat as she instinctively took a step back, bumping into the side table and knocking over a stack of wedding catalogs. Miss Merrick, Julian said, his tone conversational yet laced with lethal precision. Last month, your bridal studio was facing bankruptcy due to an outstanding commercial loan of $2.4 million. If I recall correctly, it was Maris who personally secured that credit line using her own savings as collateral. Paige's jaw dropped, her face flushing a mottled, ugly red. Julian didn't stop. His gaze swept over Margaret Northwood, who stood frozen, with her hand clutching her chest. And Mrs. Northwood, 3 months ago, when you claimed you fell down a marble staircase and fractured your tibia, Maris spent 22 consecutive nights in the private pavilion of Merrowfield General Hospital, sleeping on a vinyl cot, while administering your physical therapy. How remarkable that your recovery was. So miraculous you could spend the entirety of yesterday afternoon on your feet at Miss Merrick's studio, pinning lace onto another woman's gown. Margaret gasped, clutching the back of a dining chair to keep from swaying. You don't understand the circumstances. Oh, I understand them perfectly, Julian said smoothly. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his coat and withdrew a sleek, brushed titanium tablet, tapping the screen once before handing it to the lead journalist from the Merrowfield Daily Herald. Take a look, gentlemen, Julian addressed the room, though his eyes never left Gavin's pale, trembling face. The complete chat logs of an enterprise titled Operation Protect Gavin and Serena, spanning 4 years, detailing 29 deliberate fabrications, staged injuries, and coordinated psychological abuse. designed to keep Miss Ellington compliant while Mr. Northwood pursued his covert engagement with Miss Colebrook. A collective, sharp intake of air swept through the press corps. The journalists descended upon the tablet like starving wolves, their cameras flashing in blinding bursts as they captured the high-resolution screenshots. Denise Ellington. I'll tell Maris my shoulder was crushed by a billboard. That'll keep her from pushing for a June wedding. Margaret Northwood. The vet gave Scout a mild sedative. Tell Maris the dog died from something she fed him. That'll break her spirit for at least 6 months. Serena Colebrook. Thank you everyone. Gavin is taking me to the Solmere coast this weekend. Tell Maris he's at an energy summit in the capital. Gavin Northwood. Pinned announcement updated. 29th operation. Successful. The room erupted into an absolute frenzy. Mr. Northwood, did you fake the poisoning of your own dog to deceive your fiancé? Mrs. Ellington, are you confirming you faked a critical injury to sabotage your biological daughter? Miss Colebrook, were you aware that your luxury vacations were funded by Northwood Group while Mr. Northwood claimed business travels? Serena let out a sob of pure terror, hiding her face behind Gavin's back as the microphones were shoved inches from her nose. Gavin, make them stop. Gavin, do something. Gavin was entirely paralyzed. He stared at the tablet in the reporter's hands, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't even ball them into fists. Maris. Gavin rasped, taking a desperate step forward, his voice cracking. Maris, you set me up? You went to Julian Sterling behind my back. I looked at him. I looked at the sharp lines of his face, the dark hair I had once smoothed back while he slept, the lips that had whispered 1,000 promises in the moonlight. 10 years ago, promising me an ordinary house with a white fence and a life of simple dignity. I felt no rage. I felt no urge to scream or strike him. I only felt an immense, hollow lightness, the feeling of a prisoner stepping out of a dark cell and realizing the iron door had never even been locked. Gavin, I said, my voice carrying cleanly over the clamor of the cameras. You told me earlier today that I should learn to be independent. You told me that 30 was too old to be thrown off by a little cold. I slipped my hand into Julian's, feeling the steady, grounding warmth of his fingers interlacing with mine. Thank you for the advice, I said, offering him a faint, polite smile that contained not a single drop of warmth. I took it. Julian turned, shielding me effortlessly from the flashing cameras with the broad span of his coat, and led me out the front door. Behind us, the front hall exploded into chaos, shouting reporters, Serena's hysterical crying, Denise's shrill cursing, and Gavin's broken, desperate voice calling my name into the cold night air. I didn't turn back. Not once. The ride in Julian's black Maybach was quiet. The rain had begun to fall over Merrowfield, fine drops streaking the tinted glass, blurring the neon lights of the city into long ribbons of gold and red. I sat in the plush leather seat, staring down at my hands. The skin over my knuckles was dry, and the faint bandage near my hairline throbbed with a dull ache, but my breath came easier than it had in months. Julian reached over, picked up a thermos from the console, and poured a cup of warm chamomile tea infused with honey, setting it into my hands. Drink, he said softly. You've had a long day. I took a sip. The warmth bloomed through my chest, chasing away the chill that seemed to have settled into my bones over the last 10 years. How long have you had those chat logs? I asked quietly, looking out at the passing streetlights. 2 weeks, Julian replied, his voice even and unhurried. My cybersecurity division flagged an encrypted group channel routed through an auxiliary server at Northwood Group. When I saw the member list, I had my people pull the entire transcript. I looked at him. His profile in the dim light was austere, composed, and undeniably handsome. The face of a man who had rebuilt his family's dynasty from the ground up after his father's passing, never faltering, never bending to anyone. Why didn't you just send them to me? I asked. Julian turned his head, his dark eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. Because if I showed you the evidence while you still had hope in him, you would have looked for excuses for him, Julian said, his voice dropping into a lower, gentler register. You would have told yourself that his mother pressured him, or that Serena manipulated him, or that he was just confused. You would have stayed, Maris, and you would have let them bleed you dry for another 10 years. The truth in his words was like a mirror held up to my past self. He was right. For 10 years, I had made excuses. When Gavin forgot my birthday, I told myself he was working to build our future. When he canceled our anniversary trips, I told myself he was under too much stress. When the curses struck, I blamed my own fate, my own birth, my own inadequacies. I had to wait, Julian continued softly, reaching out and gently brushing a stray lock of hair away from my forehead, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second against my temple. Until you saw it with your own eyes. Until you were ready to walk out the door yourself. And the promise? I murmured, looking down at the gold signet ring on his pinky finger. 10 years ago, on the rooftop behind the university library, when you said that if neither of us was married by 30, we'd get married. A rare, soft laugh rumbled in Julian's chest. Did you really think that was a drunken joke, Maris? I blinked at him. I have never joked about contracts in my life, Julian said, his eyes steady and unwavering. I loved you when you were 20 handing out flyers in the snow to pay your tuition. I loved you when you were 25 working 12-hour shifts at the design firm. And I love you now. He leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between us until I could smell the faint scent of cedarwood, rain, and vintage tea on his collar. I gave you 10 years to see if that boy could become the man you deserved. Julian whispered. He failed. Now it's my turn. The car came to a smooth halt before the iron gates of St. Jude's Chapel. The ancient stone church was illuminated by soft amber spotlights, its stained glass windows glowing against the rainy night. Outside the double oak doors, the city registrar and 2 solemn witnesses stood waiting under black umbrellas. Julian stepped out first, opening his umbrella and extending his hand toward me. I looked at his outstretched hand, strong, unblemished, and patient. Then, without a single hesitation, I placed my hand in his and stepped out into the rain. By morning, Merrowfield had completely lost its mind. The morning headlines did not merely report the scandal, they consumed it like wildfire. Heir of Northwood Group unmasked. 29 staged tragedies to con the fiancé who served his family for a decade. The marriage-desperate woman was the victim. Complete chat logs of Operation Protect Gavin and Serena, released to public. Sterling Enterprise announces marriage of Chairman Julian Sterling and Maris Ellington. The stock market opened at 9 in the morning. By 9:15, the stock price of Northwood Group plummeted by 28%, triggering an automatic trading halt. By 11:05, major institutional investors announced the immediate withdrawal of their credit facilities, citing catastrophic governance risks and severe ethical violations. Inside the grand penthouse of Sterling Manor, none of that noise reached the breakfast table. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the southern gardens. The scent of freshly ground coffee, buttered croissants, and poached eggs filled the dining room. I sat in a cream-colored silk robe, holding a cup of hot black coffee, watching the news feed on my tablet. Julian sat across from me in a crisp navy suit, buttering a slice of toast with practiced precision before placing it on my porcelain plate. Eat something, he said without looking up from his financial ledger. Your lawyer arrives at 10. My lawyer? I asked, looking up. For the Ellington family assets, Julian replied, setting down his butter knife and looking at me with cool amusement. Your mother used your name to guarantee 3 separate bank loans for Serena's overseas tuition and Paige's studio lease. We are transferring the debt liability entirely to their personal accounts this morning. Before I could reply, my phone began vibrating continuously on the marble table. I glanced at the caller ID. Denise Ellington. I let it ring for 3 cycles before sliding my thumb across the screen and tapping the speaker button. Maris. Denise's voice exploded from the speaker, raw, shrill, and frantic. Maris, you ungrateful wretch. Look at what you've done. The reporters are camped outside our house. The bank just froze my pension account. Have you lost your mind? I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling entirely unmoved. Good morning, Mother, I said calmly. Don't you mother me, Denise shrieked. Call Julian Sterling right now and tell him to take down those chat logs. Tell the press it was all a private family misunderstanding. Serena has been crying all night. Her brand sponsorships have dropped her, and Gavin's father had a stroke this morning. How can you be this heartless? Heartless? I tilted my head, looking out at the blooming hydrangeas in the courtyard. When you told me your shoulder was crushed by a falling billboard so I would cancel our 3rd wedding date, did you think about how heartless that was? That was for the family. Denise sputtered, her voice faltering before ramping back up into desperate fury. Serena is sensitive. She had just come back from Europe, and she needed Gavin's support. You've always been tough. Maris, you survived on your own since you were a girl. Why couldn't you just yield to your sister for once? Because I am 30 years old, I said, my voice dropping into a cold, lethal quiet that silenced the screaming on the other end. And I am done yielding. Maris. From today on, I continued, my legal team will handle all communication regarding the property leases, the outstanding bank guarantees, and the family trust. Do not call this number again. If you show up at my workplace or my home, the court will serve an immediate restraining order. You wouldn't dare. Denise choked. I'm your mother. A mother who killed her daughter's dog with sedatives to keep a man from marrying her. I said smoothly. Goodbye, Denise. I tapped the red button and blocked the number. Across the table, Julian raised his coffee cup toward me in a silent, respectful toast. Clean, he said. Very clean, I smiled, picking up the toast he had prepared for me. The collapse of the Northwood household was not a swift tragedy. It was a slow, agonizing suffocation. With the public exposure of the chat logs, the spiritual advisor Elias Vance was arrested at his private estate on charges of organized fraud, unlicensed medical malpractice, and extortion. Under police interrogation, Vance broke within 2 hours, confessing that Gavin Northwood had paid him over $300,000 over 7 years to issue fake astrological readings and stage mystical omens of doom whenever wedding dates approached. The news broke on the evening broadcast, accompanied by footage of Vance being led away in handcuffs. At the same time, Paige Merrick's wedding studio was sealed by the municipal sheriff's department, with Julian's legal team calling in the outstanding $2.4 million loan that I had previously guaranteed. Paige was forced into involuntary bankruptcy. Her former clients, realizing that their wedding planner was the chief orchestrator behind a decade-long gaslighting scheme, flooded her social media channels with demands for full refunds and breach of contract lawsuits. In less than 72 hours, the comfortable world they had built on top of my silence had turned into a smoking crater. That Thursday afternoon, I drove into the downtown financial district to sign the final paperwork for my new independent interior design studio, funded entirely by my own savings and backed by the Sterling Commercial Trust. As I walked out of the glass office tower, the autumn wind whipping through the concrete plaza, a figure lunged out from behind the decorative pillars. Maris. I stopped, my hand instinctively going to my purse where my security alarm was stored. 2 private guards who had been shadowing me stepped forward immediately, blocking the man with broad, unyielding shoulders. It was Gavin. In just 4 days, he looked as though he had aged 10 years. His bespoke suit was rumpled and stained at the lapels, his tie crooked, and a thick growth of dark stubble covered his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot, hollowed out by sleeplessness and panic. Maris, please, Gavin choked, his hands trembling as he reached toward me, through the space between the guards. Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I looked at him calmly, gesturing slightly to the guards to allow him to speak, without lowering their guard. What is there left to say, Mr. Northwood? I asked, pulling my cashmere coat tighter against the chill. Don't call me that, he begged, a tear cutting a clean line through the grime on his cheek. Maris, please. I made a mistake. I was weak. I was an arrogant idiot who thought. I thought you would always be there. He took a step forward, his voice cracking with raw, unvarnished agony. Serena, she's not who I thought she was. The moment the stock fell, the moment my father froze my personal accounts, she packed her bags and tried to book a flight back to Paris. She doesn't care about me. She never did. She just wanted the lifestyle, the jewelry, the status. And you gave it to her, I said quietly. For 10 years, you gave her everything she asked for, using my life as the stage. I was blind. Gavin fell to one knee on the cold concrete paving stones, heedless of the passers-by who stopped to whisper and take photos with their phones. Maris, when I went back to that empty house, when I saw your empty closet, when there was no dinner on the table, when I had a fever and nobody came to bring me medicine, I realized I was dying without you. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and frantic, brimming with the pathetic hope of a condemned man. Come back to me, Maris. We'll leave Merrowfield. We'll sell Northwood Group, take whatever money is left and move to the coast. I'll marry you tomorrow. I swear on my life, I'll never look at another woman again. I looked down at the man who had once been my entire world. I remembered the cold rainy nights I had spent waiting on the porch for his car to pull up. I remembered the blood on my knees as I climbed the stone steps of Hollowpine Abbey, begging the heavens to lift a curse that was nothing more than his cowardly cruelty. I felt no satisfaction in seeing him kneel in the dirt. I only felt an overwhelming sense of pity for the girl I used to be, who had wasted 10 years loving a shadow. Gavin, I said, my voice carrying the steady, final tone of a stone dropping into an abyss. When I was sick on Monday, I messaged you. Do you remember what you told me? Gavin froze, his breath hitching in his chest. You told me the medicine was in the nightstand, that I was 30 years old, and that I should learn to be independent. I took a slow step backward, turning toward the Blacktown car waiting at the curb. I'm independent now, Gavin, I said softly, and I don't need your medicine anymore. Maris, don't go. Maris. His screams echoed across the granite plaza as the guards pushed him back, his knees scraping against the stone, weeping like a broken child in the cold autumn wind. I got into the car, closed the door, and told the driver to head home. 2 weeks later, the private terrace of the Grand Solarium in North Astor was bathed in the warm, golden light of the setting sun. Below the marble balustrade, the ocean stretched out to the horizon in endless shades of sapphire and violet. The breeze carried the crisp scent of salt, cedar, and blooming night jasmine. Julian stood beside me at the railing, holding 2 crystal glasses of vintage champagne. He wore a tailored navy linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, looking completely relaxed, a world away from the cutthroat boardroom. Titan. He handed me a glass, his knuckles lightly brushing against mine. The court in Merrowfield finalized the settlement this afternoon, Julian said, taking a sip of his wine. Northwood Group has entered formal bankruptcy. Administration. Gavin's remaining personal assets have been liquidated to cover the employee pensions and commercial debts. I leaned against the railing, watching the seagulls circle over the water. And Serena, arrested at the international terminal on Tuesday, Julian replied smoothly. She attempted to flee the country carrying 3 unregistered bearer bonds, stolen from Northwood Group's corporate safe. Her bail was denied due to flight risk. And my mother? Living in a small rented flat near the southern rail yards, Julian said, turning his head to look at me, his dark eyes filled with gentle warmth. She tried to file a maintenance petition against you yesterday. The municipal judge threw it out within 5 minutes, citing gross parental neglect and criminal conspiracy. I took a sip of the champagne. The crisp, fruity bubbles danced on my tongue, sweet and clean. There were no tears left to cry, and no old wounds that still burned. The 10 years of my youth were gone, but the life that lay ahead of me was entirely mine, unburdened, unshackled, and bright. Are you thinking about the past? Julian asked softly, stepping closer until his shoulder rested against mine. I turned around, leaning back against the marble balustrade, looking up into his calm, steady face. No, I said, a slow, radiant smile curving my lips. I was thinking about the wedding. Julian raised an eyebrow, a teasing glint in his eyes. The wedding? We're already legally married, Mrs. Sterling. A signature on a registry isn't a wedding, I said, tilting my head looking at the man who had stood in the storm and waited 10 years for me to turn around. I want the dress with the long train. I want the lilies imported from the south. I want the music loud enough that all of Merrowfield can hear it. I looked into his eyes, my voice steady, light, and full of an honest, unbreakable joy. They used to call me the most marriage-desperate woman in the city, I whispered, reaching out to straighten the collar of his shirt. I think it's about time I showed them what kind of wedding I was actually waiting for. Julian's face softened, a deep, breathtaking smile breaking across his features. He set his glass down on the stone ledge, reached out with both hands, and pulled me gently against his chest, wrapping his arms around me as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Whatever you want, Maris, Julian whispered against my hair, his voice steady and true as the tides below. For the rest of our lives. Whatever you want.